billionaire husband hugged his mistress, regretted seeing his pregnant wife being proposed to by CEO. From the moment Victoria Lockhart stepped into the opulent ballroom, she felt the weight of betrayal looming in every crystal reflection. Her husband, Adrian Lockhart, billionaire magnate, with an empire that spanned continents, wrapped his arms around a mysterious, alluring stranger, thinking no one would ever discover his secret. When Victoria locked eyes with the dashing CEO, Alexander Knight, the ground beneath her shifted. In that single, breathless moment, a spark ignited that threatened to overturn everything. A lavish world of wealth and power is about to collide with heartbreak, redemption, and impossible choices. One fateful night will upend their destinies forever. Adrian Lockhart was no stranger to success. Born into modest means in Manchester, England, he had spun a single idea into a technological empire that spanned continents. By the time he was 30, Adrian owned Lockhart Innovations, a conglomerate dealing in everything from cutting-edge robotics to artificial intelligence solutions for multinational corporations. His philanthropy was often spotlighted in glossy magazines, with pictures of him shaking hands with global icons like Bill Gates and endorsements from private investors such as Christopher Roberts. Everyone marveled at Adrian's genius, self-made grit, and unstoppable ambition. His wife, Victoria Lockhart, was the daughter of a respected Manhattan art curator. She had met Adrian at a London charity auction, co-hosted by Morgan Holdings and the Brooks Foundation. At first, Victoria was captivated by Adrian's quiet confidence. He exuded a magnetic aura that drew her in more powerfully than the city lights themselves. Within a year, they were married in a grand ceremony at Lake Como. The elite from across Europe flew in on private jets. The tabloids ran photo spreads of Victoria's elaborate gown, and a million fairy tale comparisons were made. Yet beneath the layers of grandeur lay an undercurrent of longing. Victoria, ever the ardent supporter, had put aside her own passion, dancing in prestigious ballet companies, to stand by Adrian in building their empire. She pivoted from twirling in satin slippers on a stage to wearing Louboutin heels at high-stakes boardroom meetings, representing the artistic side of Lockhart Innovations. In her eyes, marriage was a partnership, a vow to help each other scale the heights of ambition. But over time, the synergy they once shared had begun to wither. Adrian, for his part, was under tremendous pressure. His international expansion soared in complexity. He traveled incessantly, Tokyo one week, Berlin the next, Singapore in between. Between signing deals, forging alliances, and fending off corporate rivals, the spark that had once fueled his love for Victoria turned into a slow, burning ember. They spent less time talking and more time briefing each other on schedules or appearances. Nights in their penthouse on Fifth Avenue grew quiet and cold. During a pivotal business trip to Hong Kong, Adrian met Elena Rossi, an elegant, sharp-witted financial consultant hailing from Italy. She had shimmering raven hair, an accent that curled around her words like a song, and a keen understanding of global markets that matched Adrian's own intellect. Their professional relationship blossomed into late-night dinners that blurred into whispered confessions. Adrian had not intended to betray Victoria, but in the hush of expensive hotel suites and the sparkle of city lights on Victoria Harbour, he found himself captivated by Elena's intensity, the fresh spark of admiration in her eyes, the sense that she saw him as a man, not just an empire. By the time the rumors of his closeness with Elena started surfacing, Adrian insisted that it was all part of a bigger deal. "She's just a partner for the Southeast Asia expansions," he would say, brushing off the tabloids. Victoria believed him at first. After all, she had built her life around trusting Adrian's decisions. but the flickers of jealousy in her heart threatened to ignite each time his phone buzzed late at night. Their friends, some genuine, others merely socialites orbiting the Lockhart galaxy, noticed the distance. Private dinners at the Lockhart penthouse turned stifling. Adrian would sit, reading messages on his phone. Victoria would keep conversation light, discussing philanthropic galas or new art exhibitions, hoping to coax him into a laugh. But the more she tried, the more he withdrew. One evening, after an insipid meal where Adrian barely acknowledged her presence, Victoria locked herself in their ornate marble bathroom. She gazed at her reflection, emerald green eyes hollow with sadness, hair styled to perfection but lacking luster, designer gown crumpled as if in defeat. She remembered how, at 19, she had soared through the air as a ballet soloist, applauded by thousands. Now she felt like a caged bird perched on a gilded stand. She realized she was losing herself and possibly losing Adrian, but that night she resolved to reclaim her confidence. She decided that, no matter what, she needed to rediscover her own light, even if Adrian had already turned away. That resolution would be tested sooner than she imagined. Because unbeknownst to Victoria, Adrian had already flown Elena to New York, under the guise of finalizing an acquisition deal. And while Victoria believed her husband was preparing for yet another unremarkable corporate dinner, an invitation to a high-profile charity gala was about to set off a cascade of events that would change all their lives forever. The annual Midsummer Charity Ball was not just any gathering, it was one of the most prestigious social events on the New York calendar. Organized by the Pierce Bowman Foundation, helmed by Lauren Pierce and her philanthropic cohorts, it attracted billionaires, dignitaries, celebrities, and royalty. This year, the shimmering gold invitation found its way to Lockhart Innovations, courtesy of Adrian's long-standing commitment to humanitarian causes. Victoria had initially hesitated to attend. She felt overshadowed by the gilded circles her husband frequented, where conversations were quick to revolve around IPOs and global ventures. But a determined voice in her mind reminded her she used to love such glamorous nights. Before her wedding, Victoria would have been the star of the dance floor. Now, she resolved to go on her own terms, with or without Adrian's attention. She selected a gown of midnight blue velvet, accentuating her graceful figure. She carefully coiled her hair into a low chignon, a subtle tribute to her ballet days. Stepping out of her dressing room, she found Adrian glancing at his phone in the living room. He looked impeccably debonair in a tailored tuxedo, his dark hair brushed back with precision, but the exhausted lines on his face revealed sleepless nights and, perhaps, a burden of guilt. They exchanged an awkward greeting. "You look beautiful," Adrian offered half-heartedly. "Thank you," Victoria replied, willing a smile. She took a moment to admire him as well. Despite the hurt swirling inside her, some part of her still softened at the sight of his familiar face. "Shall we?" she asked, offering her arm. They arrived at the Grand Marquette Hotel's ballroom, an opulent setting with crystal chandeliers, soaring arches, and a polished dance floor that glittered under swirling lights. The city's elite mingled amidst whispered deals and clinking champagne glasses. Victoria recognized a few acquaintances, offering polite nods and curtsies. Then, out of the corner of her eye, Victoria spotted Elena Rossi. Dressed in a scarlet gown that clung to her figure, Elena wore a diamond necklace that twinkled like a constellation. She was in the company of several business executives. Adrian stiffened by Victoria's side. "Adrian," Elena called out, her voice smooth as silk. She made her way over, ignoring the tension brimming between husband and wife. "So good to see you outside of board meetings," she smiled, extending a manicured hand for a brief handshake. Victoria's heart hammered. She had seen pictures of Elena, mostly from business articles praising her consulting work, but seeing her in person, watching how her eyes flicked toward Adrian with something deeper than professional respect, made the air taste bitter. "Victoria, I've heard so much about you," Elena said politely, turning her attention to the wife. "Likewise," Victoria managed, forcing her voice to remain steady. Adrian cleared his throat, as if to dissolve the tension, and beckoned a passing waiter. "Shall we get champagne?" he asked, awkwardness lingering in his tone. Elena graciously agreed and floated away to greet more guests, leaving the couple alone for the moment. The gala proceeded with the usual fanfare, a welcome speech from Lauren Pierce, a live orchestral performance, and a high-stakes auction to fund the Pierce Bowman Foundation's next educational initiative in Africa. Victoria bid on an original Picasso sketch, the paddle in her hand trembling slightly. Adrian matched her bid with an extra flourish, as if trying to prove a point. But something else was happening across the room, drawing Victoria's attention. A tall, confident figure wearing a crisp black suit, the very picture of success and composure. He was Alexander Knight, the CEO of Knight Enterprises, a rival to Lockhart Innovations in certain markets. Knight Enterprises specialized in advanced logistics and shipping solutions worldwide, but Alexander Knight himself was also a venture capitalist, rumored to be expanding into biotech. Whispers around the room said he was soon to become one of the youngest Fortune 50 CEOs in American history. Victoria had never met Alexander, but she was aware of his presence through the occasional mention at Lockhart board meetings. She sensed a quiet hush fall among guests as Alexander made his way across the marble floor, greeting well-known philanthropists and celebrities with firm handshakes. When his eyes finally landed on Victoria, he seemed to hesitate, then offered the slightest hint of a smile, as though recognizing her from somewhere. In that moment, Adrian was distracted by a call. He glanced at his phone, then exchanged hushed words with an associate before rushing out of the ballroom. Alone, Victoria felt a swirl of emotions. Was it annoyance at her husband's abrupt departure, or relief that he was gone so she could finally breathe? She wandered toward the grand staircase, leading to the upper tier of the ballroom, searching for a quiet corner to gather her thoughts. To her surprise, she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she found herself face to face with Alexander Knight. "Miss S. Lockhart," he said, inclining his head respectfully. "I've been wanting to meet you, Alexander Knight." "Victoria," she answered, her voice softer than usual. "The pleasure is mine. I've heard quite a bit about your work, Mr. Knight." He let out a smooth chuckle. "Please, call me Alexander. And likewise, I've admired your philanthropic efforts and your past as a dancer, if I'm not mistaken." Heat rose to her cheeks, partly from the compliment, partly from unexpected delight that someone recognized her for who she had been before she became Miss S. Lockhart. "That was a long time ago," she said, forcing a humble laugh. "Some things never fade," Alexander said, his eyes flicking over her poised stance. "That grace remains, even if it's no longer on a stage." They spoke for only a moment before a board member from Knight Enterprises interrupted, but in those few seconds, Victoria felt as though a window had opened, letting in fresh air she never knew she needed. Little did she realize that this fleeting conversation was just the first step in a dangerous dance of fate, one that would pit a billionaire husband's secrets against the undeniable pull of a potential new love. And it would all begin, ironically, in the same place where Adrian Lockhart was desperately trying to keep his mistress from overshadowing the wife he once adored. In the days that followed the charity ball, tension simmered in the Lockhart penthouse. Adrian had left abruptly that night, using some vague excuse about a merger crisis. Victoria pretended not to notice the faint trace of perfume clinging to Adrian's jacket when he came home at dawn, or the text messages flashing onto his phone whenever he left it unattended. Determined not to lose herself, Victoria reignited a sense of independence. She reconnected with her old ballet mentor, Madame Billionaire, who ran a small dance studio in Midtown. She started attending early morning stretch classes, quietly rediscovering the strength in her limbs and the joy in movement. The studio's mirrored walls reflected a version of Victoria she had thought long gone. The city outside bustled as always, honking taxis, swirling crowds, tall skyscrapers glistening under the sun. Victoria felt alive amidst it. For years her identity had been overshadowed by her role as Miss S. Lockhart, but practicing her plies and pirouettes at the crack of dawn reminded her that she too had once been a force of nature, an artist, a dreamer. She wasn't just an accessory to a billionaire's life. Meanwhile, Alexander Knight's path began intersecting with Victoria's more frequently. She bumped into him at an art exhibition where Knight Enterprises was one of the sponsors. He approached her amid glass sculptures and paintings by contemporary artists, striking up a conversation about aesthetics, creativity, and how technology intersects with art. Far from the typical business talk that surrounded Adrian, Alexander genuinely listened to Victoria's ideas on how corporate donations could fund more artistic endeavors in the city. Their dialogue flowed with surprising ease, as though they had known each other for years. Adrian, however, was spiraling down a precarious path. His affair with Elena Rossi was no longer a carefully hidden secret. The tabloids had started buzzing with rumors, fleeting photos of Elena entering or leaving high-end restaurants where Adrian's name was on the reservation, or anonymous sources claiming they had seen the two together late at night. At the same time, Lockhart Innovations faced a crucial juncture, a potential partnership with Horizon Biotech that would revolutionize medical technology. Stress pressed down on Adrian's shoulders like a vice. He couldn't afford a scandal, nor could he resist the temptation Elena offered. The mistress, meanwhile, seemed to enjoy her increasing power. Elena glided in and out of Adrian's office without apology, consulted him on business deals, and even suggested a move into European markets that threatened to overshadow a Knight Enterprises contract. She was strategic, cunning, and possessed an allure that Adrian found difficult to break away from. Yet, a tiny voice in his head grew louder each day, a voice that remembered the sincerity in Victoria's eyes, the unwavering support she had always given him, the sense of home she provided when the world felt too big, too demanding. One late afternoon, in a sleek, modern office overlooking the Hudson River, Adrian and Elena were reviewing a potential acquisition target. A storm raged outside, rain slashing the glass walls. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Elena was explaining a legal clause with her typical fervor when Adrian's gaze dropped to her hand, resting on a folder. He couldn't help but envision Victoria's hands, soft, graceful, often adorned with a modest ring rather than flashy jewels. Elena noticed his distraction and paused. "Adrian, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. He swallowed, forcing a nod, just stressed about the next quarter. "We'll handle it," Elena said, placing her hand atop his. It was a small gesture, but it sent conflicting emotions ripping through him. He thought he wanted this closeness, yet all he felt was a pang of guilt. Adrian pulled away, returning to the documents. "Let's focus," he muttered. When the meeting ended and Elena left, Adrian found himself alone in the office. The storm had passed, but dark clouds lingered overhead. He glanced at a framed photograph on his desk, Victoria, at the Lake Como wedding, beaming with pure, radiant joy. He remembered the promises he had made, how he had felt the first time he saw her dance, the reverence in his heart. He realized how far he had drifted from that vow. A sense of unease settled in his gut. Was it too late to turn back? At a charity luncheon downtown, Victoria found herself face to face with Elena. The tension was electric. Unlike the subdued candlelit galas, this event was held in a sun-soaked garden terrace with guests dressed in crisp linens. Alexander Knight was there too, offering quiet support to an education fund for underprivileged children. Victoria stood by a table decorated with white orchids, flipping through a brochure about the foundation's latest initiatives. She felt a presence behind her and turned to see Elena. Up close in broad daylight, Elena's confidence radiated from her every pore. "Victoria," Elena greeted, voice devoid of the usual politeness. "I was hoping to speak with you." Victoria's heart clenched, but she met Elena's gaze evenly. "Yes?" Elena's smile did not quite reach her eyes. "I just wanted you to know that the business expansions I'm working on with Adrian are going well. He's under a lot of stress, but I'm keeping an eye on things." The insinuation was clear, a thinly veiled remark that she was keeping an eye on Adrian as well. Victoria felt her pulse spike. For all of her poise, she still found it difficult to face the woman rumored to be with her husband. Summoning her composure, she answered, "I appreciate your professionalism. Adrian's well-being is, of course, important to me." Elena's lips curved into a more mocking grin. "I'm sure it is." Before Victoria could respond, Alexander Knight approached. "Victoria, there you are," he said, casting a polite glance at Elena. "Excuse me, may I steal Miss S. Lockhart for a moment? There's someone I'd like her to meet." Relief flooded Victoria's expression. She offered Elena a tight smile, then turned to follow Alexander. He guided her through the throng of guests until they stood near a small fountain, water trickling softly. "Thank you," Victoria breathed, grateful for the rescue. "Your tension was visible across the terrace," Alexander remarked kindly. "I have an eye for reading people, especially in the corporate arena." Victoria tried to smile. "She's quite forward," she admitted, careful not to say too much. Alexander studied her face. "You don't have to pretend with me. I know rumors about Adrian and Miss Rossi are circulating, but rumors aren't always true." The sincerity in his voice drew Victoria's gaze upward. She felt a sudden urge to confide in him, a stranger who seemed to have more empathy for her than the people in her own household. But caution clamped her tongue. "You have no obligation to share anything," Alexander added quickly. "I just want you to know that if you ever need a friend, or if there's anything I can do." He let the thought trail off. Their eyes locked, and an unspoken connection passed between them. It was not mere sympathy, it felt like genuine caring. A wave of warmth spread through Victoria, startling her. Even in her confusion and pain, she felt safer by Alexander's side than she had in her own penthouse for months. Across the terrace, Elena observed them, her eyes narrowing. She made her way to a table where Adrian, just arrived, was greeting fellow donors. Slipping her arm casually through his, Elena leaned in and whispered in his ear, "Your wife and Alexander Knight seem awfully close." Adrian glanced over, spotting Victoria laughing at something Alexander said. A surge of jealousy jolted his chest. Rationally, he knew he had no right to feel this way after everything he had done. Yet seeing Victoria share a moment of camaraderie, perhaps even intimacy, with another man felt like a blow to his pride. A swirl of confusion hit Adrian. He realized the precariousness of his situation. He was with Elena, his rumored mistress, yet yearning for the presence of his wife, a woman he feared slipping beyond his reach. That same evening, when they returned to the penthouse, Adrian found Victoria sitting in the living room, reading a report on philanthropic projects. He settled on a couch across from her. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Victoria marked her page and set the papers aside. "Yes, we do." Silence hung between them. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, as if nature itself braced for the confrontation. Adrian braced himself, determined to speak first. But the enormity of what he needed to say, a confession, an apology, lodged in his throat. Instead, he asked, "Are you and Alexander Knight becoming friends?" Victoria's eyes widened, surprise overtaking her. "You brought me here for that?" "He's a competitor," Adrian offered lamely. A bitter laugh escaped Victoria's lips. "You sound jealous." Adrian didn't deny it. He tried to form an explanation, but all that came out was a helpless shrug. Victoria rose from her seat, crossing the room to stand by the window. Dusk had painted the sky in purples and oranges. She spoke without turning around. "Adrian, I've stood by you through everything, your expansions, your travels, your late nights, these suspicious rumors. But do you even see me anymore?" He felt the weight of her words sink in. He wanted to say he did, that he loved her, that he had been blind but could see now. Instead, the word that slipped out was, "Sorry." Victoria turned, her eyes shimmering. "We're both exhausted," she said quietly. "I'm going to bed." She left him sitting in the half-lit room. In the hush that remained, Adrian realized that his internal battle between loyalty, guilt, and a misguided desire was on the verge of costing him the best thing that had ever happened to him. The days turned to weeks, and the distance between Adrian and Victoria seemed irreparable. Tabloid headlines continued to swirl, intensifying public scrutiny. Billionaire's marriage on the rocks. Lockhart and Rossi, business partners or more. Adrian's PR team scrambled for damage control, releasing formal statements that Elena Rossi was merely a trusted consultant. But the public had a way of seeing through such platitudes. Paparazzi staked out the Lockhart offices, and rumors of an impending divorce circulated. Victoria tried to maintain her composure, but the pressure was mounting. She spent more time at the dance studio, gleaning solace in the familiarity of mirrored walls and piano music. Madame Beaulieu, sensing Victoria's turmoil, encouraged her to perform at a small charity recital, an event that would raise funds for underprivileged youth in the city. It was nothing grand, but the idea of stepping on stage again both frightened and invigorated Victoria. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Madame Beaulieu asked one evening as Victoria practiced her arabesques. Victoria paused, catching her breath. "I need to do this for myself," she replied softly. Though it terrified her, she knew that returning to dance might be the only way to reclaim the sense of wholeness she had lost. Meanwhile, Alexander Knight continued to appear in Victoria's life at seemingly opportune moments. He was present at business forums, art exhibitions, and philanthropic gatherings, the same circles Victoria frequented. Each time their paths crossed, they shared cordial greetings that blossomed into deeper conversations. She found herself impressed by his empathy, his willingness to acknowledge the personal side of success, and the importance of nurturing relationships. A part of her also recognized the danger in these encounters. She was a married woman, yet her husband was drifting farther away with each passing day. Alexander, on the other hand, seemed to offer emotional refuge, quiet corners to escape the media storm, earnest smiles that asked nothing in return. She realized she was becoming more reliant on his kindness, storing each moment of their connection like a precious keepsake in her heart. At the Lockhart Innovations headquarters, a different storm brewed. The Horizon Biotech deal that Adrian had been courting was on shaky ground. Competitive offers from Knight Enterprises threatened to steal the partnership. Executives were at odds, with some questioning Adrian's leadership amid the personal scandals. Elena Rossi was working overtime to protect Adrian's interests, but her presence only fueled the rumor mill further. One evening, after a grueling board meeting, Adrian slumped in his executive chair. Papers were strewn across the mahogany table, and the city lights cast a reflective glow on the glass walls. Elena approached, carefully placing a folder on the table. "We need to act quickly," she said, referencing a critical clause in the deal. If Knight Enterprises finalizes the contract first, you lose $1 billion investment and your foothold in advanced medical AI. Adrian massaged his temples. I know, but I can't keep ignoring the scandal. Investors are worried about the stability of my personal life. Elena's eyes hardened, then ended. Admit to Victoria that the marriage isn't working. Let's make a clean break. I can help manage the fallout. Adrian felt a spike of anger. Elena, that's my wife you're talking about. Her expression remained cold. You made choices. Adrian, don't be naive. You either move forward or you risk everything for a marriage that's hanging by a thread. He stared at her, realization dawning that perhaps Elena's ambitions ran deeper than affection. She might be leveraging her influence to secure her own place at Lockhart Innovations. The line between personal desire and corporate strategy had blurred dangerously. Instead of replying, Adrian stood and grabbed his coat. I need some air, he muttered, leaving Elena alone in the conference room. Outside, city traffic pulsed with its usual frenetic energy. Pedestrians hurried along sidewalks, bright advertisements lit up Times Square, and the scent of street food mingled with exhaust. Adrian walked aimlessly, his mind a chaotic reel of regrets and half-formed solutions. He ended up at the edge of the Central Park Reservoir, gazing out over the water reflecting the skyscrapers. He fished his phone from his pocket and found a picture of Victoria from their honeymoon, her laughter captured mid-moment as a breeze tossed her hair. He wondered if he could still salvage what they had, or if, in his pursuit of power and validation, he had destroyed the only real treasure in his life. Word spread quickly about the small charity recital at Madame Beaulieu's dance studio. It wasn't intended to be a glamorous event. Tickets were limited. The venue was modest, but curiosity about Victoria Lockhart's return to the stage drew attention. Some cynics speculated this was a PR move to soften the image of the scorned wife. Others genuinely admired her courage. Victoria tried to tune out the noise, focusing on her routine. The day of the recital arrived, and she dressed in a simple ivory leotard and a flowing tulle skirt. In the cramped backstage area, she fought off a surge of nerves by recalling the sense of freedom she once felt dancing before an audience. As she stepped onto the small stage, the lights dimmed. A hush settled over the audience, which included philanthropic patrons, local families, and a handful of media scribbling notes. The spotlight cast a gentle glow as the piano began a slow, haunting melody. With each step, each extension of her arms, Victoria's world narrowed to the music and the movement. She felt her soul unfurl in the dance, stirring memories of youth, of possibility, of hope. When the final note faded, applause thundered. Breathless and flushed, Victoria bowed, tears shining in her eyes. In that moment, she felt more alive than she had in years. Her gaze swept across the crowd, spotting the proud face of Madame Beaulieu. Then she saw Alexander Knight, standing near the back, clapping with a sincerity that made her heart lurch. Her husband, Adrian, was conspicuously absent. After the recital, Victoria was surrounded by well-wishers, each congratulating her on a beautiful performance. She politely smiled, still reeling from the emotional release of the dance. Alexander approached, offering her a bouquet of pale pink roses. You were mesmerizing, he said simply. Thank you, Victoria murmured, her chest still tight from the adrenaline. She inhaled the rose's sweet scent. I'm grateful you came. Alexander's eyes flicked toward the stage. I've seen my share of ballet performances in major cities, but none had quite the purity of emotion you just revealed. Before she could answer, Madame Beaulieu bustled in, praising the performance and whisking Victoria away to greet donors. Alexander trailed discreetly, ensuring she had space. After the small wave of congratulations subsided, They found themselves alone in a quiet hallway leading to the dressing rooms. Victoria's hair was still pinned back in a bun, wisps falling around her face. The adrenaline from the performance pulsed in her veins, her eyes shining with a new vibrancy. Alexander studied her for a moment. The tension between them was palpable, an awareness that something more was stirring, something that neither had outright acknowledged. "Victoria," he began, his voice hesitant, "I know this might not be the most appropriate time, but there's something I need to tell you." She instinctively clutched the roses tighter. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, as if bracing for rejection. "I've developed a partnership with an overseas conglomerate that could overshadow Lockhart Innovations' current expansions." Part of me hesitated, because of you. Shock flashed across Victoria's features. "You mean you're going head-to-head against Adrian in the Horizon Biotech deal?" Alexander nodded, his eyes filled with conflict. "I can't deny that my company's best interests are at stake, but I also can't deny that he paused, searching for the right words. "I care about you." The confession hung in the air, crackling with tension. Victoria's heart pounded. She felt a torrent of conflicting emotions, loyalty to Adrian, bitterness at his betrayal, gratitude for Alexander's kindness, and fear of crossing a line she could never uncross. "A part of me is angry with Adrian," Alexander continued softly, "not just because he's my business rival, but because he doesn't seem to appreciate who you are." Victoria bit her lip. "You don't know everything that's happened between us." "Maybe not," Alexander conceded, "but I've seen how strong you are. And I've also seen how he struggled with how to phrase it diplomatically. He hurt you." She forced her eyes shut, trying to steady her breathing. Tears threatened, but she wouldn't let them fall. She refused to break down now, not after such a triumphant moment on stage. When she opened her eyes, Alexander was still there, gazing at her as if she were the only person in the world. It was a feeling she had long missed, a sense of being truly seen. "You deserve better," he said, gently, taking a step closer. "I know I'm risking a lot by speaking this way, but I can't lie about my feelings." Victoria's hands trembled around the bouquet. She inhaled the scent of roses again, stalling for courage. At last, she lifted her gaze to meet his. I'm so confused," she admitted. "Everything in my life is crumbling, and I don't know how to fix it." In that instant, Alexander made a decision. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Victoria's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a delicate ring, a gold band set with a single radiant diamond. "Victoria Lockhart," he said, voice shaking with earnest emotion, "I know you're married, but you've been wronged. If there's any chance for you to seek happiness elsewhere, I want to be that chance." Her mind whirled. This was insane. She was still legally Adrian's wife, yet here stood Alexander Knight with a ring, offering her a new future. She took a step back, pressing her free hand to her chest, tears brimming. "This is too fast," she whispered, her voice quavering. "I can't." Alexander's eyes were clouded with longing. "I'm not asking you to marry me this instant. I'm asking you to consider a life beyond the pain you're in. When you're ready, if ever you're ready, I'll be here. I'm offering a promise that you won't face betrayal under my watch." Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. She stared at the ring, her heart hammering with a mixture of disbelief, temptation, and a sliver of hope. But how could she accept when her marriage, broken as it was, still chained her heart? She did not answer. Instead, she closed the box gently, returning it to Alexander's hand. I need time. I can't." Alexander nodded, swallowing his disappointment. "I understand." He slipped the box back into his pocket. "I'll wait." In that hallway, as the sound of applause and chatter echoed from the main studio, Victoria felt her world shift on its axis. She had just danced a piece that symbolized resurrection, a return to a passion she thought lost. And now, Another door was opening, a door that could lead her away from the devastating shadows of Adrian Lockhart's betrayal. Adrian Lockhart found out about Alexander Knight's proposal the same way much of the world did, through an article that leaked to a business gossip site, complete with grainy, hurried photos of Alexander kneeling in front of Victoria backstage at the recital. The headline blared, "Alexander Knight proposes to Victoria Lockhart, billionaire rivalry turns personal." A shockwave ripped through Adrian. The images weren't crystal clear. One could argue that Alexander was just offering a congratulatory gift, but the rumor mill was unstoppable. The very morning the story broke, Adrian rushed to the dance studio only to find it closed. Madame Beaulieu informed him politely that Victoria was no longer there and had gone home hours ago. His heart hammered as he climbed into his chauffeured car, barking at the driver to head to the penthouse. Rain pummeled the city streets, lending a sense of urgency and gloom to his race across Manhattan. When Adrian burst through the penthouse doors, water dripping from his coat, he found Victoria sitting on the living room sofa, her eyes rimmed with fatigue. She lifted her head slowly. "Adrian," she greeted, her tone weary. He stood there, chest heaving, hair plastered to his forehead. "Is it true?" he demanded, voice cracking with an odd mixture of fury and desperation. "Did Alexander Knight propose to you?" Victoria remained composed. "He offered me a possibility," she admitted carefully. "I haven't accepted anything." Adrian's pulse thundered in his ears. "Why would you even allow such a conversation? You're my wife." A sharp laugh escaped her lips. "Oh, now you remember I'm your wife?" she retorted, eyes flashing. "Where was that indignation when you were off with Elena?" He flinched as if struck. The painful truth of her words stole his breath. "It's not what you think," he tried, though he knew how hollow that sounded. "Elena and I," Victoria shot to her feet, anger and heartbreak radiating off her. "Don't lie to me again, Adrian. I've seen the pictures, heard the rumors. Is that why you've been so distant? So you could chase another woman while I was trying to save our marriage?" Adrian's throat constricted. He remembered Elena's advice to make a clean break, but in this moment, all he wanted was to keep Victoria from leaving him. "I made a mistake," he whispered, his eyes brimming with regret. "I was overwhelmed, lost, but I never stopped caring about you." Her expression softened for a fraction of a second before she steeled herself. "You didn't just make a mistake. You shattered my trust." He moved closer, cautious, as though approaching a wounded animal. "I know. I'm sorry. Victoria, please, I want to fix this." She searched his face, as if assessing whether his remorse was genuine or just another facade. Finally she spoke, her voice tremulous. "Is your affair over? Will you cut ties with Elena completely?" Images of Elena, the seductive partner who had comforted him in lonely hotel rooms, flashed through Adrian's mind. He realized that whatever fleeting solace he had found in her arms was nothing compared to the magnitude of what he was losing. "Yes," he swore, "I'll end it, I promise." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the muffled roar of rain against the windows. Victoria wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to hold her own heart together. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore," she admitted. Adrian nodded grimly, acknowledging that trust was not repaired overnight. "I'll do whatever it takes. We can go to counseling, or take a break from the city, anything, as long as we have a chance." She let out a shaky sigh. "I need space. Let me think." He reached out tentatively, wanting to touch her, to hold her, but she drew back, tears filling her eyes. "I'm not leaving yet," she said quietly, "but I need to figure out if there's anything left of us to save." Adrian's eyes filled with tears too. He wanted to gather her in his arms, but he feared the contact might break her resolve or remind her of all his betrayals. Instead, he watched as Victoria walked into the bedroom and closed the door softly behind her. The emptiness of the living room seemed suffocating. That night, Adrian slept fitfully on the couch, wrestling with nightmares of losing Victoria. The next morning, he called Elena. His decision was unwavering. "We're done," he told her bluntly. Her silence on the other end of the line was telling. After a moment, Elena's voice emerged, icy and calculated. "You'll regret this," she warned. "If you think I'll go quietly, you underestimate me." Adrian shut his eyes, absorbing the weight of her threat. "Do what you have to do," he said, ending the call. Elena Rossi didn't waste time making good on her promise. Within days, sensitive documents regarding Lockhart Innovations' negotiations with Horizon Biotech leaked to the press, jeopardizing Adrian's last-ditch efforts to secure the deal. Shares in Lockhart Innovations wobbled, investors panicked, and the board demanded immediate damage control. Meanwhile, tabloid rumors of Alexander Knight's proposal to Victoria Lockhart fueled public fascination with the billionaire love triangle. Every major newspaper and celebrity blog published their own spin, with paparazzi lurking around the Lockhart penthouse. Victoria found herself a reluctant prisoner in her own home, forced to endure phone calls from friends, journalists, and even strangers offering unsolicited opinions. One evening, as the sun dipped behind Manhattan's skyline, Adrian returned from an emergency board meeting. He found Victoria pacing the living room, phone clutched tightly. She looked up at him, eyes filled with a mixture of worry and frustration. "We can't keep going on like this," she said, as soon as Adrian closed the door. He loosened his tie, exhaustion etched into his features. "I know," he murmured, slumping into an armchair. "The board wants me out if the stock continues to plummet. Elena's leaks have caused irreparable damage." Victoria stared at her husband, remembering the once confident man who had dazzled her at charity auctions and whisked her away on spontaneous getaways. Now, he looked hollow, ravaged by regret. "This is going to sound crazy," Adrian began, his voice subdued, "but I need to partner with someone with enough influence and capital to weather this storm. And ironically, Knight Enterprises has the resources to save Lockhart Innovations." Victoria's heart lurched. "You mean you want to approach Alexander?" Adrian nodded, swallowing his pride. "It might be the only way to keep my company from collapsing. At least, Knight Enterprises can't afford to let Lockhart Innovations sink entirely. It would destabilize the entire sector." The irony weighed heavily on them both. Victoria could sense his desperation, but also recognized the magnitude of the request he was about to make of her. "Sure enough," he said, "I need your help talking to Alexander." Her eyes widened. "You're asking me to speak to the man who just offered me a ring? The man who," she trailed off, feeling heat rise to her cheeks as she remembered Alexander's gentle words and sincere promise. Adrian bowed his head. "I know I have no right to ask this of you, but if there's any chance you can talk to him, persuade him to consider an alliance or a partial investment, it might save thousands of jobs, my employees, their families." Victoria let out a shaky breath. Memories of the employees she had come to know during philanthropic events flooded her mind. Receptionists who always greeted her kindly, developers who worked late nights to launch new software, marketing interns who saw Lockhart Innovations as a stepping stone to brighter futures. She realized that sometimes personal pain had to step aside for the greater good. She finally nodded. "I'll reach out. I'll see if he's willing to talk to you." Adrian exhaled, relief washing over him. "Thank you." Her phone vibrated, and she noticed Alexander's name flashing on the screen. Fate had a cruel sense of timing. With trembling fingers, she answered. "Victoria," Alexander's voice was calm, tinged with concern. "Are you okay? I heard about the leaks. It's all over the business news." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "I'm managing," she said quietly. "Actually, I need to talk to you about something important, preferably in person." He agreed to meet her the next day at a discreet rooftop lounge in Midtown neutral territory, away from paparazzi and corporate spies. After the call ended, Victoria felt a swirl of conflicting loyalties. Adrian watched her, guilt etched into every line of his face. "Victoria, I know this isn't fair to you," he murmured. "I have no right to ask for your help." She offered a sad smile. "I'm doing this for the people who rely on Lockhart Innovations, not just for you." That night, she slept in the guest room, her mind teetering between memories of Adrian's betrayal and Alexander's unwavering promise. She remembered the ring Alexander had shown her, the glimmer of hope for a new life. She also remembered the tears in Adrian's eyes when he realized she might truly leave him. The city lights twinkled through the curtains, a silent testament to the illusions of grandeur and power. Beneath the shimmering facade, the cracks in Victoria's world ran deep. Tomorrow she would face Alexander Knight, the man who had offered her escape, and ask him to help the very empire she once thought would be her forever home. A brisk wind swept across the rooftop lounge when Victoria arrived to meet Alexander. The sun had begun its descent, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and lavender. She wore a simple grey coat and black ankle boots understated, hoping to avoid attention. Alexander stood near the edge, gazing at the cityscape like a commander surveying his domain. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she approached. He turned, a subtle smile softening his sharp features. "For you, always." They found a quiet corner behind large planters of ornamental grasses. The gentle hum of the city below made the space feel cocooned from prying eyes and ears. Victoria decided to be direct. "Alexander, you know what's happening with Lockhart Innovations. The leaks, the plummeting stock." She took a breath, her voice trembling with the weight of her request. "Adrian wants to propose a partnership. He needs your help to stabilize the company." Alexander's expression tightened. "So he's turned to me, of all people?" She nodded, feeling the sting of shame on Adrian's behalf. He recognizes how ironic this is. But thousands of jobs, crucial research, philanthropic projects, they're all on the line. Silence followed, punctuated only by the wind rustling the tall grasses. Alexander studied her with unwavering intensity. "And what do you want, Victoria?" The simple question made her heart clench. "I want those people to be safe," she confessed, voice unsteady. "Lockhart Innovations is bigger than Adrian. Despite everything he's done, there are so many good people there." Alexander stepped closer, his gaze never leaving her face. "And about us?" he asked softly, taking her hands in his. "Did you think about what I said at the recital?" Her heart pounded. She remembered the ring, the heartbreak, the sense of longing for a love that would never betray her. But she also recalled Adrian's tears and his promise to end the affair. She looked into Alexander's eyes, searching for words. "I'm so torn," she admitted, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "I never imagined I'd be in this situation." His hands tightened gently around hers. "Victoria, I won't force you. I just want you to be happy. You deserve that." She swallowed hard. "I appreciate that. But right now, I need to focus on salvaging what I can. My marriage might be broken beyond repair, but Lockhart Innovations can still be saved." Alexander reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim folder. "I anticipated this. My board and I have already run some projections. If Knight Enterprises steps in, we could offer a joint venture that buys out a portion of Lockhart's shares to inject fresh capital." Victoria's eyes widened. "You already considered this possibility?" He offered a wry half-smile. "I'm a business strategist. I knew Adrian might eventually need me. I just didn't expect the request to come through you." She bit her lip, glancing down at the folder. "Would you be willing to meet Adrian personally?" Alexander nodded, though his jaw was set. "Yes, On one condition, her stomach twisted, which is, "You'll allow yourself to consider a future with me," he said softly. "Not now, not tomorrow, only when you're ready. But you won't close your heart to the possibility." Tears threatened again, but Victoria fought them back. She wasn't sure if she was ready to accept or even consider acceptance. Still, after the whirlwind of heartbreak and betrayal, she found solace in knowing Alexander's intentions were genuine. Finally, she whispered, "I promise I'll keep my heart open, but I can't promise more than that yet." Alexander nodded, acceptance in his eyes. "That's all I ask." They planned a meeting for the next evening, set at a neutral location, a private office space downtown where lawyers and advisors could convene. As they parted, Alexander leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to Victoria's forehead. The tender gesture nearly undid her resolve. In that fleeting touch, she felt both the promise of a new beginning and the pang of guilt for a marriage that might be unsalvageable. The next day, Adrian arrived at the private meeting room, accompanied by his legal counsel and a key board member. He wore a charcoal suit that hung a bit loosely on his frame, stress having taken a physical toll. Victoria walked in moments later, her gaze drifting awkwardly to the sleek black sedan idling outside that had brought Alexander. Then Alexander Knight himself entered, exuding the same quiet confidence that had intrigued and comforted Victoria. He wore a tailored navy suit, and his piercing gaze flicked briefly to her before settling on Adrian. The tension in the air was thicker than the plush carpet beneath their feet. They sat at a large oval table under pendant lights. Once the formalities were out of the way, Alexander slid the folder across to Adrian. "Knight Enterprises is prepared to inject capital in exchange for a sizable stake in Lockhart Innovations," he explained. "We believe a strategic partnership can harness both companies' strengths, especially in the biotech realm." Adrian's lawyer scrutinized the proposal. The numbers were generous, an undeniable lifeline. Adrian's shoulders relaxed marginally. This was better than he had dared to hope. "What's your timeline for finalizing this?" Adrian asked, glancing at Alexander. Alexander leaned back in his chair. "We can move quickly, but we expect transparency. Any undisclosed liabilities or further scandals, and this deal is off the table." The meaning behind his words was clear. No more lies, no more hidden mistresses, no more tabloid fiascos. Adrian dipped his head contrite. Understood. The discussion moved smoothly from there, focusing on logistics, share percentages, and synergy. The lawyers dotted every I and crossed every T. Victoria, sitting quietly, watched the interplay of power between the two men, one her husband, the other an unexpected suitor. She marveled at how fate had twisted their lives into this complicated knot. After nearly 2 hours, they reached a verbal agreement. The official paperwork would be prepared for signing within the next week. Adrian stood, extending a hand. "Thank you," he said to Alexander, a gruff sincerity in his voice. "This means a lot." Alexander shook Adrian's hand. The two men stared at each other, a silent understanding passing between them, respect mixed with unspoken rivalry. Then Alexander turned to Victoria. "Let's give them space to finalize details," he said gently. "Would you like some air?" Victoria nodded, and they stepped out onto a small balcony overlooking the city. The late afternoon sun gilded the skyline in gold. She leaned against the railing, her pulse thudding. "I'm proud of you," Alexander said quietly. "You did the right thing, helping him save the company." She closed her eyes, letting the breeze ruffle her hair. "I just hope it was worth it." They stood there in comfortable silence until Adrian appeared at the doorway. For a moment he hesitated, seeing the two of them together in the soft light. Jealousy flared in his chest, but he knew he had no right to demand anything. Instead, he cleared his throat. "Victoria?" She turned, stepping away from Alexander. "Is everything settled?" Adrian nodded. "Yes, We'll finalize next week. Thank you for bridging this gap. Relief washed over Victoria. If nothing else, she had helped avert disaster for Lockhart Innovations employees. She mustered a small smile, stepping back inside. Adrian followed her, but not before casting a glance at Alexander. In that unspoken exchange, each man acknowledged the precarious triangle they were now part of. They left in separate cars. Adrian wanted to talk to Victoria, but she insisted she needed time. Once home, she lingered in the foyer, mind spinning with the day's events. Adrian hovered nearby, conflict storming in his eyes. "Victoria," he finally said, voice raw, "I need you to know how sorry I am." She turned to face him, exhaustion etched across her face. "I know, but sometimes Ori isn't enough." He closed the distance between them, gently taking her hands. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I can change, if you'll let me." She pulled away, tears threatening to surface. "We can start with therapy or counseling," she conceded, "but I can't promise I'll stay forever." A flicker of hope lit Adrian's gaze. "That's all I ask, for a chance." He leaned forward, intending to kiss her cheek, but she lowered her head, letting his lips brush her temple instead. It was a fleeting, bittersweet moment that underscored the fragility of their marriage. That night, Victoria sat in her bedroom, the one she once shared with Adrian, staring at a photograph of their wedding day. The weight of the ring Alexander had offered pressed upon her thoughts. She set the photo aside, realizing that for the first time in her life, she held the power to shape her destiny, free from illusions and empty promises. Tomorrow, she would stand at another crossroads, facing both men who claimed to love her. The question was, would she choose to rebuild the shaky ruins of her marriage with Adrian, or step into an uncertain but possibly fulfilling future with Alexander Knight? Whichever path she took, she vowed this: she would never again lose sight of herself. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of hidden betrayals, high-stakes business deals, and the search for love amidst heartbreak. The billionaire husband hugged his mistress and regretted seeing his wife being proposed to by the CEO, reminds us that life's biggest turning points often arise from the most unexpected twists. Victoria's strength and grace illuminate a pathway where even betrayal can spark rediscovery of personal passions, of hidden resilience, and of a love worth fighting for. Will she rebuild trust with Adrian or choose a brand new future with Alexander Knight? The answer lies in the whispers of her heart and the courage she finds to pursue genuine happiness. If you enjoyed this dramatic tale and want more stories that captivate, inspire, and keep you on the edge of your seat, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating immersive storytelling content just for you. Stay tuned for our next adventure,